Hey guys, this is Chase Jennings, and you're watching the second episode, the first full length episode actually, of the Terra Parva Show. Now, we're going to get in some really interesting topics this episode, and we're going to be talking about primarily how to know when you can turn your hobby into a business. Now, I'm not necessarily going to promise you that you can get rich off of it, but it is potentially a way that you can feed yourself, pay your bills, set your own hours, not have to work for the man. Those are all great things, right? Now, when I started my own small businesses, they did all start off as hobbies, something that I was interested in, that I had passion for, and I wanted to learn about. And it didn't start with just dart frogs. I actually started out with microfossils as my first business, and that was because I worked in the paleobiology laboratory at A&M, and I was sorting microfossils, and I thought, this is really fun. What if a person could do this at home? And so I actually went out and collected some fossiliferous matrix from a site nearby that had a bunch of shark teeth, shells, things like that in it. And I processed it to get out most of the soil, where there was mostly just small pebbles and fossils in it. I bagged it and I sold it as my first product, and that was Microfossil Matrix under Microfossils, etc., my first business. Now, this was a really fun product because people could just literally open up this little bag, sort through it at home, and make their own little collection of fossils. And that business was actually really successful when I was in college. It was just a lot of work because I had to go out with a pickaxe and collect all this matrix and then process it through boiling, putting hydrogen peroxide in it, drying on these large screens. It was a very messy business, but it was very profitable at the time. But it was one of those things that eventually grew into something that I didn't expect. I eventually got into amber and opened a amber mine down in Chiapas, Mexico. And we started to get all these beautiful pieces of amber that had insects in them. We also had lots of amber jewelry, carvings, etc. Now, I eventually sold that business. And I did that at the time because, quite frankly, I wanted the money to get my own house. And that was kind of the seed money for the down payment for the house. But, a lot of people ask me, like, why did you sell it? And it's just because it was time to move on. Now, if I had continued to grow that business, I'm sure that I could have grown it into something that would have made quite a bit more than it did in college. But that was my first business, and I didn't know everything at the time that I do now about marketing, about scalability, about profitability, and about overhead. Those are all things I'd like to share with you on this episode in particular, so that maybe you can think about those things if you're deciding that you do want to turn your hobby into a business as well. Now, with the dart frog business that most people know me from, it started out with going to a reptile show. And when I went to that reptile show, I was really surprised when I saw that, for one example, springtails, people were literally selling plastic tubs that you can buy at a store for $1 with some charcoal that you can buy for maybe another $1 and springtails. It was amazing that people were selling these anywhere from $10 to $20 for a small container of insects. Well, funny thing is, hexapods, now I know, but the funny thing is, you could really do that with anything. People collect leaves outside and they sell them for $5 or $6 for a bag. You could literally just go in the forest and there's millions of dollars sitting there. You could also get isopods and just feed them table scraps. Put them in some soil in a container. Dwarfite isopods are great to start with. Just feed them table scraps and they'll reproduce, and then you can sell them for, $8, $9, $10 a culture for just a few of them. So when I went to this reptile show, I saw all these products that people were making a lot of money off of with very low input costs. And what I had originally learned from my other company, Microfossils, etc., was that the biggest part of a business being successful, besides the person themselves and the route that they take, how they build their business, is the products themselves and the profitability of those products. When you have an item that you can literally put $2 or $3 into and sell for $10 or $20, that's a very good product. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of stores that operate off of Keystone, and that's doubling their money. But really, when you're operating a small business rather than a giant corporation like Walmart or Target or something like that, you really do need a minimum of 3 times margin. Because generally, 1/3 of that item, if you sell an item for, let's say, $3, right? $1 will be the cost of the item to produce it. $1 will be your overhead. And that's going to be, for instance, your vehicle, the maintenance, the wear and tear on it, the gas that you put into it. It's going to be your electricity. It's going to be your water. It's going to be your time, all these different things, or the time of somebody else if you hire them. And then that last third is going to have to be split between taxes with Uncle Sam, and it's going to have to be split with growth, being able to invest in other products. Because at the end of the day, if you're just making the same amount of money that you originally spent, then you're just spinning your wheels and wasting your time. And I've seen so many people in this industry and other industries that they run their business like a hobby. And what I mean by that is they will literally put $1,000 into the items they're selling, particularly animals. They'll feed them, they'll water them, and they don't realize that all these costs are adding up. Cents a day, dollars a day, it all adds up. And then they wonder when they decide to do it as a business, why they can't feed themselves, why they then have to shut down their business. And the reason for that is because they weren't actually making money. They were just spending money and then regaining that money. And they thought because they were gaining a lot of money at once, maybe $1,000 a reptile show, and they were spending only a little bit at a time, because it's really easy when we're spending a little bit at a time to not really monitor it, right? If somebody charges you $1 a day, it's not a big deal. But when they charge you $30 for a month, oh, it's a big deal. Or they charge you $360 for a year, it's a big deal. It's kind of like a frog being in water. The whole saying that, the way to boil a frog is by slowly raising the temperature, which I think is horrible, but the frog doesn't realize that it is slowly boiling to death. It's the same thing when you run a business as a hobby. You have to account for every dime that you're putting into it. You have to account for every minute that you're putting into it, because it all adds up. So going back to this, you have to look at your profit margins, because if you are literally putting in $3 into an item and selling at $3, well, that's a waste. You might as well not even sell that item. You really want to have items that you're making a minimum of 3 times margin on. If you can make 4 or 5 times margin, then that's amazing, because that actually allows for good growth. Now, you'll also ask yourself, why am I paying for, these items? Why am I paying 4 or 5 times as much as somebody originally made those items for? Well, the whole reason is because of, IP, intellectual property, maybe knowledge that you don't have, or it's going to be that person's time and expertise. At the end of the day, we could all do our own plumbing. We could do our own electrical. We could do our own car maintenance, but we decide we could cut our own hair. But we decide to pay other people for their time and expertise, because that is worth doing. Because at the end of the day, we can't be a complete jack of all trades. We can't do everything. We rely on others. And if you want to start your own small business, you need to figure out a niche and how you can fit into that niche to provide a service to others that they don't have the time or the expertise to be able to do themselves. Now, again, I decided to jump into this with dart frogs. I saw that the margins were great, and I saw that a lot of the items were relatively easy to make starting out as well. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I'll be brutally honest, that is super easy to mix your own substrate, ABG. The recipe is online. All the ingredients are easy to find online. The only thing that's tricky about that is increasing margins comes down to finding the best sources, getting at the best prices. which is not just about the source, it's also buying those items in bulk, which costs a lot of money up front. But if you can get your unit price down as much as possible, you're making more per bag, and therefore your business will grow a lot faster. Now, that's going to be another thing too. You need to have a variety of products. When I was starting Houston Frogs, I started with the basics. I started with springtails. I started with isopods. I started with plants, ABG mix, frogs, of course. I started with all the things that you typically see in a dart frog business. But here's where I differentiated from the others. I have a strong background in laboratory work. I was an environmental scientist for 5 years. I've worked in the paleobiology laboratory, which kind of got me into a laboratory setting originally. Then I was an environmental scientist. Then I started doing mycological work and then phytological tissue culturing in a laboratory that I actually built on my own, that I designed the filtration systems on. And all that experience allowed me to eventually come up with some new products that the industry had not seen before. Because one of the things I love to do, my passion, is innovation. My passion is creating some things that are new to the world, that people will enjoy, that they'll appreciate, and that will make some improvement in their lives and the lives of the animals. Now, so that's really where I started to differentiate my own company, Houston Frogs. And that's actually what really built my company up to be so well known, was having scientifically sound products. Now, again, if you're wanting to start out, and this, it doesn't matter if you want to have a company that just builds terrariums, little scenes. If you want to build little terrariums that, are self-sustaining. They used to have some really cool little biospheres that they sold when I was a little kid that would have water and a couple little shrimp and some algae, and the algae would grow in the sunlight, and then the shrimp would eat the algae, and then they would poop, and the poop would fertilize algae, and it just, they would go sometimes for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, really at the most. They didn't last for too terribly long, but it's really cool. Anyways, really the sky's the limit. Again, you could also start a business selling cars, selling precious metals. You could start a business really doing anything. I started another business besides Houston Frogs, mounting insects. That's my exquisite butterflies business. And I based that off of my love for entomology and being able to mount insects in a realistic pose like you would find them while they're alive. And then, of course, I combine those with my knowledge of induction lighting, and then also my knowledge of resin molding as well, and 3D printing. It all kind of combined into one business. And then, of course, I started my miniatures business. I started a business importing tea. If you've ever heard of ocean tea bag, the animal-shaped tea bags that are from Saitama, Japan. And then also samurai arms and armor, things like that. And then, of course, I also do luxury real estate down in Galveston. I do a lot of things. So, but at the end of the day, really what turned these into businesses was originally an interest in those things, learning as much as I could about them, diving into it, and then testing the profitability of those particular businesses, because some businesses are a lot more profitable than others as well. Now, again, if you want to get started, there are some major components you're going to have to think about, and that's going to be what the business is. Of course, the more niche it is, the smaller the market is, but the less competition there is as well. That's what I always loved to do, was go around and see, hey, what is there a niche for that somebody else is not filling? I went to these AMA conventions, and of course, nobody was selling animal-shaped tea bags. Nobody was selling real swords. They were selling fake swords. Nobody was selling real gachapon toys or real figurines from Japan. They were selling knockoffs. I had gone to fossil and mineral shows, and nobody was selling fossils or minerals from Japan. Nobody was selling amber from Chiapas, Mexico. They were all selling amber from the Baltic regions. They weren't selling amber that was from Myanmar. I went to coin shows, and they were not selling the silver samurai era coins, the one shu and the one ichibugen, things like that. And so I went into a lot of the markets that I did because I saw that there was kind of a vacancy, and I wanted to fill those vacancies. And that's really the easiest way to get started. Now, that's not to say that if you get into a business that there is a lot of competition in, that you'll never survive. It's all about differentiating yourself. And it's also about analyzing how you're building that business to make sure that you reduce overhead as much as possible so that you're not going to sink if things go wrong. Now, the thing that most people don't realize is that in this industry, well, in any industry, perception is everything. Perception is power, really. At the end of the day, there's a lot of things that you believe that are not true. And the reason that you buy products is because of those beliefs. Let me give you a small example. If you were to say go into a supermarket and you were to buy a bag of chips, and if that bag of chips is a 16-ounce bag of chips, but there's only 5 ounces of chips in it, how many chips do you think are in it? You may think, oh, there's 16 ounces. If they then reduce the amount of chips in that bag to 4 ounces, but they keep at the same price and they keep in the same 16-ounce bag, would you notice? Would you notice if they decreased it by a half an ounce, 1 ounce? How about if they increased the size of the bag? If they increased the bag from 16 ounces to 20 ounces, but they kept that same 5 ounces of chips, would you pay more money for it? You probably would. And this is why I see a lot of the time at reptile shows. I've seen a lot of times where people will take springtails and, if they sell them in an 8-ounce container, there may be 10,000 springtails in that 8-ounce container. But then if you take that same, and say that's at $8, okay? Take that same 10,000 springtails, put in a much larger container, let's say a gallon container. Would you be willing to pay $20 or $30 for that, even though it's the same number of springtails? A lot of people are. Everything is perception. And I hate to say that, but it's true. There's a lot of big brands out there that command a lot of respect, I guess you could say, when people see the brand, when people see a product from them. But there are better brands out there. Sometimes bigger is not better. Just because something is more well known doesn't mean it's better. And I'm not going to name any particular names of any sort, but I will tell you that I see this so often that people will see a big brand, they'll see marketing everywhere, and they think, oh, they're successful, they must be good, they must be great, their products must be great. And a lot of times it's actually the opposite. And that's kind of one of the dirty secrets, I guess you could say, that are in this industry and in many others. Just because you see a brand on something doesn't make it better at all. But packaging sells as well. You can take the most amazing product in the world, you can put in crappy packaging, and you can take the worst product in the world and put in amazing packaging. And the one with the amazing packaging, even though it's a crappy product in comparison, will sell more every single time. It'll sell for a higher price because everything is about perception. Now, I'm telling you this because I don't want you to feel like you're being duped, but you kind of are. I want you to start thinking about the products that you're buying. And again, if you're wanting to start your own small business, this is one of the most important aspects you need to think about is if you are a customer, which you are at this point, right, before you start a small business, what would you want to get? Would you want to get an honest product? Would you want to get exactly what you think you're paying for, or would you like to get smoke and mirrors? Because when I was designing my products, that's something that I thought about. I thought about if I was buying these products, right? If I was going to a reptile show, for one example, and buying one of these products off the shelf, do I want something that's snake oil? Do I want something that is smoke and mirrors? Or do I want something that's actually real? something that is thoughtfully designed, something that is scientifically sound, something that's actually going to help me rather than something that is just going to be pixie dust that will do nothing. So I thought about that while I was designing each and every one of my products. And the other thing I was thinking about was every single thing that could potentially go wrong with those products and how I wanted to safeguard against them. I'll give you a small example. When I was designing my mushroom kits, the mushroom industry is completely different from the vivarium industry. And I mean completely different. If you try to look up on Google how to grow mushrooms, they're going to tell you some things that if you grow those the way they tell you to, they are for farming. They're to give you as large of a harvest as possible, which as large of a harvest as possible also tends to give you as large of a spore drop as possible, depending on the particular strain you're working with. And that can kill animals so quickly. So when I was designing my mushroom kits, I did not just Google how to grow mushrooms. I did not go with the quote industry standard. What I did was I designed my own methodology to make sure that those kits were not only shelf stable, to where they were not bursting out in just a week or two when hobbyists were not ready to use them, but I also made them to where they would be safe for the animals, because that was something that was very important to me. I want to put these beautiful fungi into vivariums, but I also wanted to make sure that they were not going to be something that would harm the animals. Because if you do exactly like the mushroom industry tells you, then you could have a large spore drop that unfortunately will block up the respiratory system of geckos, frogs. It'll clog the pores on the skin of the frogs. It can cause a lot of issues. So anyways, it's very important to think about these things. Now, if you're just doing some basic products, it's relatively easy, right? Springtails, for one example, it's been done 1,000 times over. We pretty much know every single thing that can go wrong with springtails. And that's usually if you overfeed them, cause too much yeast to grow in the culture of springtails, more than what these springtails can eat. And those actually respirate, create a lot of CO2, and they will kill off the springtails through CO2 poisoning. You can also have the springtails dry out, right? But so far as the springtails being actually dangerous to the animals, we don't really know at this point of any danger that they're going to cause. And that's the really cool thing. It's a known product. So again, if you're starting up in, dart frogs, vivarium supplies, anything like that, that's kind of a safe product to get started on. It's the same thing with isopods. It's the same thing with dart frogs or plants or anything like that. Those are all kind of known items. Seed pods and cork bark and fruit flies and you name it. Those are all known things. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into designing your own products. This is not something where I'm going to be revealing any company secrets of any sort. This is not something where I'm going to tell you how to design your own products. That's really up to you. But I will tell you a lot of the things that I've tried, and I'll tell you a lot of the things that worked and what didn't work. So I took a tiny break, and I'm going to go ahead and refocus this episode. We just have a few minutes left. I'm going to try and keep these to about 30 minutes here. But we're going to refocus on that question of how I knew, for instance, that a hobby could be turned into a business. And the first way, of course, is looking at to see if it's something that is a niche that I can learn everything I possibly can about, become an expert in, become more advanced in, and then be able to build a business around that. Being able to offer the expertise, the knowledge that I've learned, being able to offer that in some form of a product for customers or service. The second thing is profitability. You have to look at, can I turn $1 into at least $3 or $4 or $5? Not can I turn $1 into one more dollar, because unfortunately businesses just tend not to survive like that. You really need to at least get 3, 4, 5 times margin. And again, that's because this is an extremely expensive country to live in. It's an extremely expensive country to do business in. I love the US, but I also love Japan. And I really love that you can operate a business off of 10 or 20% margin in Japan. You just can't do that here. Our electrical bills are very high. The cost of living in general is very high. Rent is very high. Interest on mortgages is very high. The cost of maintaining a vehicle is very high. Our food expenses are very high. Our electricity is very high. It's just really, really difficult, near impossible to be able to run any kind of business in the long term, at least getting off the ground, only making, 10, 20, 30, even 100% margins. So the next thing, of course, is going to be, how you scale your business. Because at the end of the day, a business really is difficult to feed yourself with if you can't scale it. It's great if you can do something once. Can you do that same thing 100 times? If you have a product that takes you 5 hours to make, well, if you're going to work a 10-hour day, if you're going to make 2 products in that day, can you feed yourself off of just those 2 products per day? Oftentimes in businesses, when we're starting up, the first 2 years, you're not really going to see much profit. That's the investment phase. That's the learning phase. You're trying to work out all the kinks. And that's also when you're trying to build your own brand. You're having spent a lot on materials, equipment, branding, experimentation, so to speak. I mean, there will be losses because you don't know everything starting out. So you really have to make sure that you can survive for those 2 years. Now, with that being said, it's kind of the same formula for everything. With all the businesses that I've run, it's kind of very similar the way it happens. And again, it's just following all these steps. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you're starting a business, you may also have to put in a lot more hours than you put in at a regular job. I typically work about 120 hours a week, and I've done that for the last at least 20 years. And quite frankly, I still love what I do, and I really don't mind working that many hours, but that's kind of what it takes to be successful. If you're running your own business, you can't do a regular 9 to 5. You have to kind of do a 24/7. It's a lot of sacrifice. I'm not going to tell you it's easy because it's not easy, but it's also not impossible. Really, almost anything is possible if you have enough motivation, if you have enough know-how. A lot of the time, it's not a matter of being lucky. It's a matter of being someone who's persistent, someone who just does not give up. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of failures. At the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of things that will be unexpected. Things will not go the way you plan them to because this is not a perfect world. But if you learn from your mistakes, if you're constantly persistent, you don't give up, then oftentimes that does lead to success. And that's what I've found. So anyways, I will end with that. It's kind of a little pep talk. Really at the end of the day, you can work for yourself and be able to live off that income. You could potentially become a millionaire. You could potentially be someone that becomes the next Bill Gates. It's just really all up to you. And it's all about learning everything that you can about what market you want to get into, and then diving in with both feet in a calculated way, and then giving it your all. Anyways, I'll be tackling some more specific questions in the next episode. This was just kind of a generalistic episode, trying to get your feet wet. And then I definitely want to do the next one actually on dart frogs and vivariums. But I hope you enjoy this second episode about starting up your own small business, and we'll definitely be diving more into it. If you have any questions, send them in, and I'd love to answer them. All right, take care.